Are you a new quilter? Are you interested in getting started and you're wondering, where do I start? There looks to be so much stuff out there. I have no idea what I need to get started. And you're feeling a bit overwhelmed and thinking, wow, this is going to be a really expensive hobby? If so, this video is for you. Hi, I'm Wendy Haney, and I love quilting. I'm here today because I want to help you discover the joy of quilting like I have. It just brings so much joy to my life, and because I love giving away the quilts that I make, I think it brings some joy to some other people too. So I want to share that joy with you, and I want you to get started the right way, because I know if you have the right tools and you're off to a good start, you will be more successful. And if you're successful, that means you're going to be interested in quilting. Because if you don't and you're frustrated with getting started, you're going to throw it away, put it down, and go, oh, that quilting stuff is not for me. And we definitely don't want that. So here we go. What is the main thing that you need? A sewing machine. Yep, I have a Symphony Baby Lock. Don't panic. You don't need to get started with something at that level. Yep, I've been sewing for a long time, so I have upgraded over the years. I wish I could remember what I had when I was sewing in college or right after college, but for the life of me, I can't remember what I had. But I do remember after college, after I moved out to Denver, I figured it's time to upgrade. So I went out and I was going to get a Bernina, because that's what I grew up on. Well, little out of my price point right out of college. So picked up a really nice Singer. It got the job done for a long, long, long time. Only until recently did I pick up the Baby Lock Symphony. So here's the deal. There are plenty of ways for you to go out and research sewing machines and figuring out the one that best suits you, what you want to do with that sewing machine, and your price point. And remember, you're just getting started. So you don't want to invest a lot of money into a hobby you're getting started with until you really know that you're enjoying it, because you can always upgrade. I sold my sewing machine, my old sewing machine, on Facebook just recently. So, you know what? There's ways to do that. Oh, and you always can have a couple sewing machines around. There's never a bad idea to do that, because when one goes into service, you don't want to be out without a sewing machine. I'll do a video later that walks you through checking out sewing machines and figuring out what's the best one for you. So keep an eye out for that. Okay, now you've got your sewing machine. Oh, let me back up. If you have an old sewing machine, maybe you got one from your mom, get it serviced. Get it serviced, make sure it works. As long as it sews a straight line and you can get it set to do a quarter-inch seam, you're golden. You don't need to go out and buy a new one. So there you have it. Get started with that. Now you got your sewing machine. Well, what do you need? You need needles. Needles in your sewing machine. I prefer the Schmetz needles. These are a really great brand of needle. Quilting needle size is 90/14. You could also use an 80/12. Get some good needles. Important. Good needles will make all the difference in the world in your quilting, and it will make things go so much smoother. So get yourself some needles. And as you do more and more projects, switch out the needles in your machine more often. Yep, I know. I'm guilty of not doing that until it goes clonk, 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 and it's like, oh, when's the last time I changed my needles? I am trying to remember now to have a little notebook by the side of my sewing machine that says when I last changed my needles in my machine and what projects I've been working on. Because maybe I've had a long stretch where I'm not sewing very much. Well, it's not like you say I need to change my needle every 2 months. Because if you're only sewing once in a while, that doesn't make sense. It's really about the hours and time on the sewing machine. That's what I do with my long arm. I actually have a book that says this is what I quilted this on this time, here's when I changed my needles, to make sure that machine is always up with a good fresh needle for my big projects. Okay, needles, sewing machine, thread. Yeah, that would be helpful. Thread is important. Whoa! Thread is important. Now, when I sewed clothes, you pretty much chose the color of your thread based on what you were sewing, because you were doing top stitching and all of that stuff. It doesn't quite need to be that complicated with piecing. With piecing, other than top stitching maybe on something or a binding, or when you're actually doing the quilting, the color matters. But in general, you really only need like 2 colors, a light and a dark. I'll admit I have a couple of neutral colors, but I would suggest you go with like a taupe or a light gray and a black. Black for your dark colors, taupe when you're working with a lot of lighter colors. You're good to go. A while ago, I was reading in a magazine about how the weight of your thread can impact the preciseness of your 1/4 inch seam. Because let's face it, thread has a weight. They suggested using a lighter weight thread, which is going to give your piecing more accuracy. So at that point, I switched to a Madeira Katona thread, which is a 58 weight thread. I love this for my piecing. Black, taupe, you're good to go. Okay, so now we have that taken care of. In the old days, when I first started sewing, I wasn't quilting, but I was doing making my own clothes. So of course we had a pattern and we had to cut around the pattern. Well, then with quilting we evolved to having templates, and you would use a scissors and cut around the templates. And oh my gosh, do not touch my fabric scissors. Rule number 1 in my house growing up. It's also rule number 1 in my house now, and my husband knows this very, very well. He has a set of scissors that he knows those can be used for anything else. Don't touch my good scissors. But for quilting, I rarely use these. Instead, quilting has evolved to use a rotary cutter. Yup, rotary cutters. Rotary cutters are, well, they're round. And it's got a round blade. And you cut, use a ruler on your fabric, and you cut a straight line, and there you go. I love the Olfa. That's what I use. I prefer the one that is the ergonomic handle. If you're doing a lot of quilting, you know, you've got a lot of movement there. Your elbow, your wrist, and you don't want to put a lot of stress on that. So I like the ergonomic handle. There are other rotary cutters out there. Research, figure out if you prefer something different. Go for it. Find what works for you. I would recommend this as a great starting point, great price point too. So it has a red button. So as you can see right now, no blade. I can't cut myself. If I engage it, now I move down and then I'm ready to cut. These things are very, 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 I cannot stress to you as a new quilter how stinking sharp these suckers are. Don't cut your finger. Yep, been known to happen. You can read it all across the internet about people who have cut off a tip of a finger, or God worse, because their fingers weren't where they were supposed to be, and they were in the way. And these things are sharp, and if you're cutting fast, you will cut off the tip of your finger. So don't. Always use the safety precautions. You're also going to want to get a selection of replacement blades. 5-pack is a good way to get it. It's more cost effective than buying them one at a time. And then you have them when you need them. Easiest thing is when you take your rotary blades thingamajigs apart, just take the pieces, look at them, bing, 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 in the order you took them apart, change out your blade, put them back together. You'll be good to go. It shows you on the package, but I have no clue where the package is anymore, so I'm sure you won't either. Otherwise, find it on YouTube. So there we have it. You're going to want a good sharp blade in there. And let's face it, when you're quilting and you're you're gonna nick the side of your ruler once in a while. It's just gonna happen that a blade's gonna get nicked or it just gets worn. And when that happens, you need to replace it. So if you're cutting and you're not getting a nice clean cut and it's missing a few, that means as that blade goes around, there's a nick spot in it, a dull spot that's not cutting. Change the blade. Change the blade, you'll be so much happier. There we go, so get that. So we have that. And all of these products that I'm talking about, if you have a local quilt store, please support your local quilt store. Because if we don't, they're not going to be around. But I know there is a large part of the country, and I've lived in some of those areas before, where there is no local quilt store. So you're going to be ordering online. In that case, I have put links below to all the products that I'm mentioning. Yep, they're affiliate links, but they're going to take you to Amazon because I live out here in the country. So I pretty much order everything through Amazon if I can't get it from my local store. So there you have it. If you're using a rotary cutter, you can't just cut on your table. You have to have some type of rotary cutter mat. I have a really big one here that I've discovered. It's not exactly the best thing for my rotary blades. It is not self-healing, but for my purposes on this table, I wanted a really, really, really big one that fit my space. So I have that. But in general, on the other side, I have my Olfa rotary cutting mats. Yep, same brand as my rotary cutter. So this one here is 17 by 23. It's a nice size. For many of you, this will be a size that will work for you because you don't have a bigger space. So this would work. I have several of these. They oftentimes will go with me to quilt retreats. But on my cutting table here at home, I want the bigger one. This is 23 by 35. Yep, nice and big, and I actually have a set of 2 of them on the other side that are butted together. So basically I've got, 23 by 70. And that covers that side of my cutting table. The benefit of a bigger one is when you have a yard of fabric, generally speaking, your fabric is going to fit. So the width of your fabric is going to fit on the cutting mat when you have one that is 23 tall. So that's why I like the bigger mat. Excuse me, too much talking today. Now you've got your mat, and the Olfa mats are at a good price point also. There are other brands out there, and in another video I will talk about some of the other options for your cutting mat. Key thing, please don't use the markings on here for cutting. They're references, they're good for doing a quick, oh, is this in that range? Yes, we're good. No, do not use these for precision cutting. These rulers come in. So this is a ruler I've had like forever, but it's the size that I want you to be getting. The best ruler to start with is one that is 24 by 6 by 24. The reason why is it's a nice size such that when you're working with the full width of your fabric like this, you've got a ruler that goes the whole width. So you can go right down it. The other reason is it's 6 inches. It's not a ½ inch, because what will happen as a new quilter, if you start picking up rulers like this that have a ½ inch on an end, you'll have the same thing that happens to all of us once in a while, is that you get it flipped around and you're off by a ½ inch. Whether it's a ½ inch too short or a ½ inch too long, it's kind of a bugger. So if you start with a ruler that is even numbers, 6 inches, then you're not going to run into that problem. There's another ruler that's a little bit larger, that's an 8.5 by 24. It's a very nice ruler also, but it's got that ½ inch. And that's why I'm going to suggest as a new quilter that you start with the 6-inch one. As I said, this is an old ruler. What I would recommend is the Omni Grid ruler, and they come in like yellow or neon green. The reason I love these is they're nice, clean lines. They don't have little dots all over the middle with numbers that have a tendency to get in the way of where you're trying to see once in a while. So that is the best ruler to get as to start with from a lengthwise. Now, with that said, that is the only ruler you really, for the most part, need to get started. Because I said at the beginning here, I don't want you to go out and spend a lot of money on extra stuff that you don't need to get started. So unless your first pattern that you're working with is requesting different specialty rulers, don't feel you need to go out and get them. But from OmniGrip, I'm really, really in love with their rulers. I have a large variety of their square ones. Their square ones are great for so many things, whether it's squaring up a little block, if I'm working with a 12 and a half inch block on my quilt, I want to be able to square it up. I'm actually currently working on a quilt that has a 15 and a half inch block. So, what did I have to do? I had to go out and buy another ruler. It's a 16 inch square, I think. So, this is a 12 and a half, this is an 8 and a half, this is a 6 and a half, I think they have a 4 and a half. They have rulers of the wazoo of a variety of different sizes. I love them. And I'll do another video on rulers another time, but those are there, they're an option, they might come in handy. Excuse me. Okay, so, mat, ruler, you can cut your fabric. After you cut your fabric, you may need to mark it. If you're doing half square triangles, flying geese, you're going to need to mark where your stitching lines are. So, in that case, we have a variety of markers. The key thing with your markers, whatever you decide to use, is to get one that has a very fine point. Now, if I'm working with light fabrics, a good old-fashioned 0.5 millimeter mechanical pencil does amazing, because it's fine, it stays sharp all the time, it's there, it just works for me. And it doesn't work so well when I'm working with my dark fabrics. So I like the Sewline markers. I can put in a variety of different color leads. I've got a yellow, a pink, a white. This one here actually allows me to put in a couple different colors, and I could just rotate so I don't have to change it out in here. So this pretty much stays either white or pink, and then this one's got a darker one in it. Choose what works for you. Just think about the sharpness and the fineness of it and making nice, smooth marks with it. There we have those. Scissors. Yes, I talked about my scissors before when it comes to cutting your fabric, but you're also going to want some nice little snipping scissors, because you're often going to be cutting those threads after you're done sewing your pieces. I have a ton of these little needlework scissors all over my house. I used to own a cross stitch store. I'm a needleworker, so I have these little buggers all over my house. Yep, so they work fabulously. But I discovered these Tooltron spring-loaded scissors. They're just nice. They're sharp. They work great for snipping my threads. I also do machine embroidery, so I have one by each of my sewing machines. Highly would recommend getting a pair of these. But you know what? If you have a pair of scissors in the house somewhere, I don't even care. It doesn't even matter if they're this big. You just need them to cut your threads. So, scissors. Okay. And yes, one day you're going to need this. The dreaded seam ripper. Yep, we all make mistakes. You're going to need a seam ripper. I really don't have a preference. This is a nice sharp one that I like. A lot of sewing machines will come with a seam ripper, so you're probably good to go. Otherwise, go find one that trips your trigger and you like it. The other thing is pins and a place to hold them. I started sewing on clothes, and so pins, yeah, I use pins for my piecing a lot. Some quilters don't do a lot with pins, other people's do. But I think when you're a beginner, pinning would help. So get some good quilting pins. I'll have a conversation about that another time. But the cool thing is this little magnetic bowl. Yep, best thing. So much easier than working with the old-fashioned pin cushions because you don't have to poke it in. I literally can have it here and unpin things, and I just kind of toss it towards the bowl, and as long as I get close, it gets in there. I've got one by my sewing machine, my iron, over here in my cutting table where I do my piecing. You can get them at your local quilt store. They have some pretty ones, pretty colors, other places, but I'm going to give you a hint. The cheapest place to get these is your local hardware store. I headed over to Menards and said, or Menards, Home Depot, Lowe's, one of those, whatever trips your trigger that you have in your area. And I said to the guy, I need one of those magnetic bowls that the guys throw their nuts and bolts in it. He knew exactly what I was talking about and pointed to me where I could find them. Very cost effective. So I would much rather spend my money on rulers and rotary cutters and things like that that I need that make my sewing better versus spending it on a pin holder. So go cheap on this. Oh, I think I mentioned your blades. Get replacement blades, 5-pack. Okay, now don't go away because I still have the big thing that I only recently added to what I think every quilter needs. Yes, and another type of ruler. It's a tape measure. Yep, as you are making bigger quilts with borders, you don't want to just attach a border, cut the fabric exactly the way it says in the pattern. You always want to measure your quilt in top, middle, bottom, and then take the average of it. Therefore, you need a long enough tape measure. Now, the bigger the quilts you make, the bigger the tape measure you need. So this is what I've gotten used to using because I started out sewing clothes. So it was, with your waist, your arm, it just works. And this sucker is 120 inches. So in general, even when I'm making a big queen size, king size, I have plenty of length to figure out and measure my borders before I cut them. My friends often use a little mini tape measure. And I'll admit, I dug this out of my little gadget pile over here, and I was surprised to find it's like 115 inches. So you know what? This is pretty doggone, you know what? I bet it isn't. I bet I was looking at the metric side. Oops. Either way, if you're doing smaller projects, lap quilts, a little tape measure could be all you need. Find what works depending on the projects you're doing, but be sure to measure your quilt and get the average before in figuring out the sizes of your borders. So you're going to need that. Okay, well, fabric. We haven't talked about fabric yet. All fabric is not created equal. I only learned this, I don't know, a number of years back. Because growing up, sewing clothes, you went to the fabric store and that's where you got your fabric. It was what it was and that's what you bought. End of story. Now we've got Walmart, Joann's, Hobby Lobby, your quilt store, I don't know wherever else you might get it. And I kind of assumed fabric was fabric. Well, it's not. Just like so many other things, you may get the same product coming out of the same plant. It's being manufactured by the same company, but in fact, it comes out and it stops here with the processing. So for example, for Walmart says, I need this quality of fabric to be able to put it on the market at this price point. And your fabric store says, oh, no. That is not good enough quality for my quilters. We need fabric that goes through additional processing in that plant to have a better quality of fabric. Fabric that is better quality. It's not going to have the shrinkage. It's not going to have the bleeding. It's not going to have marks on it. And that's why the exact same fabric from the exact same manufacturer, the same print, is going to have a different cost at Walmart than it's going to have at your fabric store. So it's important that you understand what you're getting based on what you're paying. And you know what? I want to support my local quilt stores, and I am spending a lot of time quilting, and so I want the best quality that I have. So I support my local quilt store with my fabric. With that said, if where you're purchasing your fabric and how much you can afford to pay for it is going to be a difference between you quilting and not, then by all means, find it where you can afford it and quilt, because I want you to be quilting. And if buying fabric store fabric is not in your budget, that's okay. Get it from Walmart and quilt. But if you can afford it, please, you'll be so much happier if you go to your fabric store and get the quality fabric. Your projects will be so much nicer, and you'll be so much happier with the finished piece. So there we have it. This is a beautiful piece of fabric that we picked up at a fabric store in South Dakota. And if I got poor quality of this fabric, it is really, really bright, and it will bleed, I am sure. And I don't pre-wash my fabric. That's another story another time. So we've got our fabric now. And the last thing, the last little gadget that I discovered several weeks ago at a quilt retreat. When we come to quilt retreat, we have tables and they're labeled with our name. This is your quilting space. And next to each of our quilting spaces, we had this. And I looked at it and went, okie dokie. And I set it aside. I don't know what this is. Later, at dinner that night, Lisa told us what this was. It is the Quilter's Magic Wand. And she told us to go out, check online, and see how to use it. I'm like, whoa, okay. And then I started using it. It is handy, and it's an inexpensive ruler. And I can really, really see as a beginner quilter how you could really find value in this. This quilter, this ruler is a 1/2 inch wide. It's 1/2 inch wide, 12 inches long, and it has an etched line in the middle. Therefore, you have a 1/4 inch on either side of that etched line. In quilting, a 1/4 inch precision mark is pretty dang important. So when messing with squares, and you're doing half square triangles and all sorts of things, you can take that etched line in the middle and put it corner to corner. And then you can take your marking pen and draw on either side of that. And now you've got 2 marks where you can sew on, and they are precise. You've got a precise ruler, a precise marking tool, you have a precise line, take it to your sewing machine, then you cut in the middle and you've got 2 half square triangles, or whatever. In this case, I used it to make this 1/2 of my little house roof. Flying geese, half square triangles, hourglass. There's just so many things that having that etched line and that precision 1/4 inch on either side comes very handy for. The other thing is when you're making blocks and you have all sorts of seams, and a lot of those are like triangles around the edges, you don't want to cut off a point or sew a point. And so in your block, you can set this on the edge of your square and you can see, oh, there's my 1/4 inch that's going to be where, there's my edge of my block, and then there is your 1/4 inch where you're going to sew, and you're going to go, oops, that point is going to get cut off. You can then mark it and know that, okay, I need to do a little tweaking with that. Or, hey, I'm pretty darn good. I'm not going to lose any points. So this really, really helps with that precision piecing and cutting. Key thing with this, it is not a ruler to be used for cutting. This is a ruler to be used for marking. marking. You want to know more about this? I just put out a video recently about the Quilter's Magic Wand. So go out and find it and you'll learn why I'm including this in a tool that you need in your beginner's starter kit. There we have it. It's not a lot. Not a lot of it is expensive. It gets you the basics. It gets you started to have a successful first project. Take care. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to stay up to date with all the new stuff I'm dropping, subscribe to the channel and hit the little bell icon. That way you'll be notified anytime I drop a new video into the channel. I'll be posting new videos every Friday morning with lots of great stuff that you aren't going to want to miss. I also would love to have you join me in my Facebook group. I have a private Facebook group that we're sharing things about life that I love. Quilting, needlework, machine embroidery, wine, books, a lot of fun stuff. So I'd love to have you join me over there. You can find it at facebook.com/group/lifefulfilled. I also can be found at the normal ways, Pinterest, Instagram, etc. You can find in the description below all the links of the places to find me, including wendyjhaney.com. If you found this video helpful, I would love to have you give me a thumbs up, drop me a comment, let me know what you'd like to see. Take care, and thanks for watching.